Hello and good afternoon. My name is Trina Crochet and I'm here to talk to you about how to update the colonial home. I'm the author of Colonial Style, Creating Classic Interiors in Your Cape Colonial or Saltbox Home, and I'm glad to be here in Philadelphia today. Colonial Style was just released this year through the Taunton Press, and I want to welcome two of my editors who worked tirelessly on seeing this book project to production. Hello, Helen, and hello, Erica. Thanks for coming. I want to point out that I'm here on behalf of Virginia Commonwealth University in Qatar, and it was through a grant that I was able to actually fly all the way over here from the Middle East to give you this presentation today. I am the assistant professor in the interior design program and thoroughly have enjoyed my time in the Middle East, but I'm going to talk to you about something that is a bit more local, and that is the colonial home. When I'm not living and teaching in the Middle East, I actually live in New Hampshire, a state that has lovely old colonial homes, as well as the Cape Cod style and the Saltbox style. So my first slide that I'm showing you today is an example of how the colonists have gone through and taken the basic cape, which is usually 2 rooms down and 2 rooms up, and then expanded it throughout history. Typically what would happen is the cape would get built first, and then as the family grew in size and the need developed and then they were able to get more money, they added on to the house. So what I'm showing you with this next slide is what we call in New England big house, little house, back house, barn. And taking this example, we see in the front the 1726 original cape, and then we have what they call the L. In this case, the L was added on in 1780s. The L is because it creates in floor plan view like the letter L, which the L was usually just a very small room that was put onto the back of the cape. And then we see in the 19th century they added what is called a connector room, and the connector room then touches the barn, and the barn that was built in the 1800s, so that you have this idea of expanding the house as need for space and a means of being able to leave the house and go straight into the barn without having to go outside. So what we're going to do in this presentation is I'm going to take you through a few case studies, and we're actually going to look and see how homeowners, just like you in the audience, are updating these capes or salt boxes or colonial homes in order to make them fully functional. So we're going to do this by looking at the period details. We're going to look at the architectural elements of the style and ways to maintain the look and the feel of this period home as we relate it to floor coverings, ceiling treatments, paint colors, built-ins, things like fireplace mantles, and then also furnishings, in order to really come up with something that is going to be livable in our 21st century. So the first example that I'm going to show you here is a house that is actually in my town in New Hampshire, and it's owned by a couple who have lived in this house for a number of decades and lovingly restored the cape and then subsequently made some additions. So what you're looking at here is the front facade of the cape that was from the 1700s. And then off to the left, you can see that that is one of the new additions. And then I'm going to show you this in conjunction with the L, because now in the lower left-hand side of your screen, what you're seeing is the back of the original cape, and then the L that is coming across the back that has a door, and then it has some upper windows, which actually makes up the bedrooms. So we're going to focus mainly on what this couple did in order to get into the L a kitchen that functions for the 21st century but without losing any of this architectural style. So I also have interjected within this presentation some interesting facts about the history of these types of houses. And the first one that I want to share with you does relate to kitchens, so it's very appropriate. The invention of the cast iron cooking stove in the 1700s created the need for a room designated for meal preparation, and the kitchen then became a standard addition. Around 1760, stoves were made having iron plates that form an oven with two hinged doors. And this was the likely genesis of all cook stoves. So here this gives us justification for adding on the L in order to accommodate basically, quote, kitchen. Okay, so in this particular cape, in the L section, what we're seeing is a very old stove. It does not date back to the 17th century, but it is an 18th century stove. And the homeowner, Eileen, loves to use the stove for her baking. So she's very much in tune to how the colonists basically worked in these kitchens and what they had to do just to get a meal prepared. But the thing about it is she took that idea of the stove, and then that is what gave her the design direction for the rest of the kitchen. So what we're looking at in this photograph is you can see that the floor are these wide pine plank floors. This would have been typical back for the time period of the L being added. And then what we also are going to see is, you get a little bit of it here, this wainscoting, which was very common in colonial homes and Cape and Saltbox homes. And the color that you see on this wainscoting is this kind of green, this green color, which is historically accurate for the 1700s. So then if we take a look at other things in history, this is from her kitchen. This is a dry sink that you see next to a stool, and then up above it is a plate rack. Now, in the beginning, workspaces in colonial kitchens included a few tables, open shelving called cupboards, which is where we get our word cupboard today, and then an array of wooden barrels in order to store dry goods. So we're looking in this view just beyond that nice big stove that I just showed you, and we're looking, again, we can see more of these wide plank pine floors, and then we can see how the wainscoting continues in this room, and the fact that the trim around the doors and the windows are painted in this this colonial green. Okay, so if we look at other parts of her kitchen, here we can see some built-in cabinets, and these built-in cabinets are carrying through the color. Okay, again, very historic color. And we notice that the windows are 9/6 sash windows. This is another colonial trait. You can date one of these homes based on, are the windows sashes, are the panes 9/9, 9/6. So here again, they're taking their clues from the original cape, but adding on this L, and then again trying to capture all of these historic details. The soapstone kitchen sink was purchased from a local salvage yard, and you can see that that is nice big farm sink. And then the countertops themselves and the backsplash is also soapstone. Soapstone is a material that you would see used back in colonial times. The flooring, again, this is recycled heart pine flooring, as wide as they were able to source from a salvage yard. And then again, you can see on the left side of this image the cupboard. So again, we're trying to use some closed-in cabinetry, but also the idea of the cupboard. And then on the floor is an oilcloth floor mat that was made by the homeowner. These floor mats were generally just canvas that were hand stenciled. These were usually homemade, and then they had a varnish over them. So that is what they used on their floors, because rugs, even back in the 17th century, 18th century, and part of the 19th century, were very, very expensive, and so you wouldn't typically see those in homes. Okay, so looking at this slide, this is just a little bit different view, and what we can see here is there is a custom design cupboard that provides storage space and a place to hide their breakfast appliances. You can kind of see the door open a bit and the toaster that's there. This is a freestanding piece of furniture, so here they have incorporated something that is built in with a piece of freestanding furniture so that it comes back to this idea of the historicism where everything just wasn't built in. And then the paint color that is on this cupboard is a red ochre. So it's a deep blood red, almost like an ox blood red. And then if you notice then to the left in this colonial green, what we're looking at is an original 18th century door that has been cut and modified, and that actually hides the refrigerator. And then we get a bit of an island that you can see here on just barely in the left. And the island itself, the base of the island as you come into the kitchen is a door that was placed on its side, okay? So looking at a little bit more of this kitchen, what they have here is we're looking back at the wall where the sink was. They still have modern conveniences. Here we see the dishwasher, but these have been integrated into unconventional cabinetry. And the green you can see is more conventional, it's built in, it's attached, but the pine cupboard that we see on the right is a piece of furniture, and it's just left in its natural pine color, and it is used as a pantry, okay? So if we look at this same view, and then in conjunction with a walk-in pantry that is in the hallway in the kitchen just beside that big nice stove that I showed you, what we see here is that the homeowners chose these punched tin panels to connect the new kitchen to this idea of the past. And because I've also written a book, The Designer's Guide to Furniture Styles, I know all of the history of furniture all the way back to Neolithic times. But these punched tin panels were used on what they called a livery cupboard in Europe. In America, we called it a pie safe. And the punched holes within the tin actually did allow the vapors to pass through the cupboard that was full of pies and pastries and cakes. So that was something that was, very common for the era. Okay, so considering kitchens in history, it wasn't until the Victorian era of the late 1800s that kitchens developed into a more regulated arrangement of appliances, cabinets, and countertops. So what I'm showing you here, this is a photo of a kitchen, and again, late 1800s. Well, here we can see the stove in the background, which is a lot different, a lot more streamlined than that stove that was in Eileen's kitchen. But what we're starting to see, and you can see it over to the left, is we're starting to see these kind of built-in cabinets, okay? All right, so moving on to another example then, and this one we're going to talk a little bit about how they were able to find space for a new kitchen amongst some other rooms. And taking a look at this particular house, it is an example of this whole idea again of how the houses started out with one and then they became connected in order to connect the main house with the barn. So the connector room that we see bridge the gap between the house. This one is a half colonial, which we can see because the front door is off-centered. It is not symmetrical. Then we have the connector room that does attach to the barn, okay? So the actual project that I'm going to show you that is from my book on colonial style is this particular house. It's a beautiful 1700s colonial. And what we can see here is that the house itself, what we can't see is the house itself then pushes straight back. So from behind the main house is the connector room, and then that connector room connects us to the barn. So what I'm going to start out with is showing you the floor plan. And this is just a partial floor plan, but I'm focusing on the kitchen. And as homeowners know of these colonial and capes houses, that these L's or connector rooms often were added in the 19th century, and that was specifically in order to get kitchens and then eventually bathrooms as well. So what we're looking at with this diagram, we can see the old part of the house has the dining room, there is a parlor, there is a small hallway that connects the parlor to the dining room, and this is where they found to put in a half bath. Now I have another house project that I'm going to show you of how they were able to integrate bathrooms. But you can see from this floor plan, it doesn't take a lot of space if you just need a toilet and a sink. Okay, then moving from the parlor and the dining room, what we're seeing then is the L. So they have chosen to add the L, give themselves a very large eat-in kitchen, and we can see from the symbols that are displayed here that we have a window seat, we have a farm table, we do have a little niche, we have our built-in cabinetry that goes all along the window and then makes a return towards the sub-zero refrigerators. And what the homeowners wanted in this large cozy kitchen is a fireplace. So they did add the fireplace. There's steps that go down to the cellar, and then when you pass by the sub-zero refrigerators, then you have a hallway, and the hallway then goes to the barn. And it is the original barn that would have been from the 18th century, and this barn becomes their new family room. So we're going to look at these in a little bit of detail. Okay, so starting with the dining room, the hall, the parlor, this again is the old part of the house. So this is the original colonial house. And what we're looking at on the left is an example of how even in colonial times, they did not have a lot of storage space, but they did hide these little cupboards in the walls. And that is what we're seeing in the dining room, which has been painted this gorgeous Chinese red that is another historic color, which is typical of the American Georgian style around 1760. And then you notice that all of the trim is painted white, and that also is a characteristic of the American Georgian style starting in around 1760. And then going back to the floor plan, you can see the hall and you can see the half bath. So you're only getting a little glimpse of this half bath, but like I mentioned before, it doesn't take a lot of room to get a toilet in and a sink. And in this particular house, the homeowners went antique hunting and they found an old piece of furniture which then they had retrofitted with a sink, marble top, and then found an antique mirror to hang above it. And then what I thought was very, very creative in this bathroom, they've got the wall sconces that have crystal prisms on them. So then if we continue into the kitchen, going back again to the plan, So we're looking at the wall that backs up to that half bath. And here we see an antique hutch, and this is a piece of furniture that was just, again, found at an antique store, brought in, left in its natural wood finish, and then to the left of it, you can see how in the new L, they duplicated the idea of the little cupboard that was in the dining room of the original house, and they kind of expanded it, recreated it here in order to show off the homeowners collection of the blue Delftware pottery. Okay, now if we take a look at the other wall in the kitchen, here we're looking towards the window seat and the bay window. So they chose to put in a bay window. A bay window isn't necessarily part of the American colonial archetype, but in this case, the homeowners wanted this nice bay window to give you a view of the property, which was many, many acres, and the positioning of it at the end of the breakfast table just is very inviting, very cozy. And what we're seeing in this view is how, again, the homeowner has incorporated her collection of that blue pottery. And then if we take a look at the wall where the fireplace is, we get just a glimpse of the fireplace here on the left side of the slide. But what the homeowners did is, again, created another one of these little cubbies, this little snack pantry that they added that is found in this kitchen. And then looking at the plan, if we then went around the fireplace, then we have the pantry and our bank of Sub-Zero refrigerators, and then going into the barn. So this slide is showing you coming now into the barn. So what the homeowners did is they did have to raise the barn. They had to raise the roof on the barn. And so what you're seeing with these trusses, these roof trusses, those have been raised up. So we have new columns and beams in the barn, and then the trusses were raised up so that you would have this nice, lovely family room. And what we see inside the family room is that the floor is essentially it's stained concrete, which works out really well. And then the walls are rough plastered. And then what we're seeing is just kind of how the room has been zoned into a TV area watching zone, card gaming or gaming zone. And you can see that they opened up the walls of the barn with these beautiful French doors that again look out onto the vastness of the acreage. Okay, so looking at this salt box style house, from all perception of it, it looks old. It looks like it was built in the 18th century. But this is a cute little salt box that is in Maine that was built brand new, but every detail was built to look old. So the salt box style homes originated from taking the idea of a colonial, but adding to the rear what they called a lean-to. And so by definition, the lean-to was usually just one story and then had a roof that sloped to connect and meet the upper level roof of the main colonial home. The other thing to point out while we have this image on the screen is that here you can see these windows are 6/9. That again would be something historic. The door itself with the transom lights above the door in the door, that is something that is truly of the period, as well as the very large, massive chimney. So when I show you the inside of this house, okay, what we're looking at is the kitchen. So the kitchen is put in the lean-to that we see off the back. And the homeowners did, again, a wonderful job of bringing in these beams. The color that we see here is this yellow ochre, which is also a early colonial pre-Georgian style of paint color. You can see they've got the two ovens here. In the other view, you can see a soapstone sink. You can see how the dishwasher has been integrated into the countertop with this sense of a wood shiplap panel that's been placed over it. And then what we are looking at just beyond that dishwasher is that we've got batten and board panels that are hiding the refrigerator, and then an old-fashioned bean Suffolk hardware, which is what we're seeing in this nice wrought iron. That's the handle to open the refrigerator and the handles to pull out the drawer of the lower freezer. And then you can see how they've incorporated a little niche of shelving for a bookcase, and then using, again, non-traditional cabinetry in order to give them pantry up above and some drawers and some lower cupboards. All right, so in history, in a time when furniture was expensive and rare, then built-ins were a practical way of providing storage space in the colonial home. And here is a home that was, again, built in the 1700s. And what we have is a corner cupboard, but it is built in. And just to point out a couple of things about this corner cupboard is you see this beautiful arch to the glass front arch, and that is something that, again, is a Georgian characteristic. So it helps to date the house, that the house would be after 1760, okay? All right, so just to show you a few other examples of what homeowners have done with kitchens, this one you can see is taking the idea of the corner cupboard, and I'm showing you two views here. So one we can see has open shelves, and on the open shelves there is a collection of pewterware and some earthenware. And then in the opposite corner, what you see is another corner cupboard, but this one being closed in with doors so that it actually, you know, is where the homeowner could store their other items. So even though if we look at the main part of the kitchen and we take a look at the cabinetry and the sink, which tends to be more modern as far as fitted cabinetry, but we can see how by the fact that they added these corner cabinets in the eat-in kitchen, of how that helps to kind of maintain this sense of colonialism. Okay, and in history, the small shafts of space running alongside the chimney flue were designated closet spaces in early colonial homes. Like this particular home is from 1830. So by looking at this whole idea of storage, these colonial homes, as we know, and the Cape homes that we know of, don't really have closets. In fact, closets were taxed. And because of the taxation on closets, this is why you have these small little cupboards tucked into whatever nook and cranny they could fit them into, all right? So how do we get storage space, other kinds of storage space? Here is an example of a room in a colonial home. So again, this particular house dates from the 18th century. And if we look at it, the homeowners have built away from the wall. You can see the French door that goes out into another room. They have built out to create a bookcase. So instead of a built-in bookcase, it's a built-out bookcase. And what they have done is simply pushed it out 12 inches, which is all you need for a bookshelf, and then fitted it with shelves, put cupboards below, and used moldings that were found in the rest of the older house. So trying to maximize the wall space just by encroaching 12 inches coming out from that wall. And then using the vertical space, you can see that this bookcase goes all the way floor to ceiling. And then similarly, in this room, this is a different house, but in this room, the homeowners have basically done the same thing, but building it out from a windowed wall. So they've split the bookcase on either side of the windows. They've built them out 12 inches. Again, open shelves above, closed cupboards below, and then fitted the space in between with a cozy, cute little window seat where the lid of the window seat raises up, which allows them to have more storage. So again, they're taking advantage of the wall length and then only pulling it out 12 inches, floor to ceiling, getting lots of space with that. And you can make it out a little bit more clearly in the bookcase on the right. The back of the bookcase is this very narrow beadboard, which is historic. And then again, you can see that the bookcases themselves are finished out with the crown molding that mimics what was already in the room. So here is a little tip. The book has lots and lots of tips for how to get new space, how to reconfigure space, where to find and buy appropriately historical, hardware, lighting fixtures, etc. But here's a tip here. When adding a built-in closet or cabinet to a period-style home, gather ideas from the architectural elements found in the other areas of the house. A batten and board door with strap hinges and thumb latch might serve well for a cabinet used in the bathroom for linen storage. So just like I had pointed out in some of these previous slides with building the bookcases or coming up with the covering for the refrigerator door, take the clues from what is in the original part of the house, because that is what is going to connect the new with the old so that it doesn't just stick out like a sore thumb. All right, so finding space for closets. Again, since these houses didn't really have closets, how do you get closet space? So here is in a Colonial home, upstairs bedroom, and what you can see is that the closet itself has been built out. So all you need for a closet, obviously these are not walk-in closets, but all you need is 24 inches. So framing it and then pulling it out 24 inches and then mimicking and duplicating the crown molding that was already in the room, and then putting these panel doors, hinged panel doors for basically his and her closets. It coordinates with the architecture, and you can see to the left the original door that connects to another bedroom, because a lot of these houses didn't really have hallways. It's just one room connected into another room. You can then see to the immediate right another one of the original doors in the house, and then how these closet door panels were made new, but again took the motif from the original doors that are in the old part of the house. I think the only criticism I would have of the homeowner here is that you can see on the doors of the original house these wrought iron hardware, and I think I would have preferred, the purist in me would have preferred to see the wrought iron knobs instead of the brass that the homeowners used here. And then this is in another house, but again, this whole idea of how do we get the storage space that we need. So in this particular house, it was a cape that was added onto with a connector room, and the connector room became the master bedroom. But what the homeowners did is very cleverly designated one wall of nothing but closet, and so not that this is built out into the room, it is something that is built into the room. And what we see once again is the panels that they used on the closet doors matched the doors that they have elsewhere within the house. And I just thought I should interject. All of these houses that I'm showing you here are in the book, and so there's much more information about these projects and what the homeowners did. All right, and then taking a look at this room, expanding small spaces. So here we have a very small L that was added to a cape. And when we look at it, very narrow room, but what the homeowners did is they opened up this narrow part of the wall, put in French doors, and then flanking the French doors are these cute little bookcases. And what they did is the bookcases on top are 12 inches deep, and then the cupboard below, those are 22 inches deep. So they're giving a little bit of articulation to these bookcases. It's not just one flat plane. And then looking at the molding that's over the door that then takes you into the back house, okay, is they've just duplicated that as the molding style for these cute little bookcases. So no matter how small the space is, you can still find places to put in storage, okay? All right, so let's move on to bathrooms. Bathrooms are always a problem in these houses because there aren't really closets so that we can hide a bathroom in a closet. So we've got to look for ways to integrate bathrooms. Houses just can't survive these days with one bathroom per family. So in history, in 1785, after his tenure as ambassador to France, Benjamin Franklin brought home to Philadelphia a copper bathtub. In those days, a bathtub was a luxury, and few people owned one or cared to own one. Okay, they didn't bathe as much as we do today. By the late 1800s, homes were designed with indoor plumbing and new rooms just for bathing. So let's take a look at some of these projects and see where can we put in bathrooms. So finding space for bathrooms, a great place to put in a half bath is under a stairwell. So even if we think of colonial houses, they typically did not use anything that was under the stairs. Just kind of an unusual thing, but in all of the colonial homes that I studied and the Capes and the salt box homes, it was just void space. So I have met homeowners who have maximized that very wisely by taking the idea, again, all you need is a toilet and a sink, and in this case, tucked into the slope of the stairwell so that you have just enough room to go inside, sit, and do your business. And it's so small, you could actually sit on the toilet and wash your hands at the same time. But what I thought was really nice about this is that the homeowners selected a very old-fashioned toilet. They put a wooden seat on it, and then they did wooden wall. So they have this, actually this is the exposed wall of the original house. And just one other note, you aren't allowed to use old toilets that you might get from a salvage yard, and that is because the plumbing codes have changed and you have to have energy efficient toilets. But there are numerous companies like American Standard, Kohler, that will have a historic collection or toilets that meet modern codes but kind of look old-fashioned. And then just one other thing to point out, you really did not have a bathroom in the house until the late Victorian period. And so that is another characteristic of this kind of the idea of the wooden seat, okay, and the white porcelain, because the white, everything was white because that was a sign of cleanliness. Okay, all right. And then this is a bathroom that was added into a homeowner's house, but up in the attic. So what they did in the pitch of the roof, big enough to stand in at a certain point. They added a master bedroom. On one side, they fitted it with closets, and on the other side, they put in this very quaint but functional bathroom. And so you can see the sink is placed where a tall person or a regular person can stand in front of the sink and still use it. To the left is a toilet, and then what would be directly behind us, as we're standing facing the sink, is a bathtub kind of shower combination. And then in this one, this homeowner actually did happen to have a closet. Again, not a very big space, but they were able to put in a nice sink with some countertop space, and used a beautiful, just old wood, recycled wood for the countertop. They chose to use an above the countertop sink and then wall mounted faucets. I love what they did here with the shaker rail to hang up their towel and face cloth. And then again, directly opposite this would be a commode, a toilet rather, and then a very, very small stand-in shower. And then with this homeowner, this is also a house that was, actually this house is in Canada. So we do have lots of colonial houses even in Canada. But in this house, up in the eaves again, is where the homeowner put a master suite, and then nicely coordinated. You can see that the room is very small. We see this old-fashioned claw tub. We can see the toilet, wooden seat, and then we see a pedestal sink. But what she did with her space is she kind of jazzed it up by using ceramic tile. That is something that, again, you don't typically see until the 1920s in bathrooms, and put mirror tiles in it. So even though it was an old house and a historic house, and she did some beautiful things in other parts of the house, like I said, in the book, these homes, there's more going on than what I'm showing you here. But she did a wonderful job with her house, and considering how, you know, she didn't have to be such a purist in it, okay? And then lastly, jazz it up. Think out of the box. Here is a bathroom where you walk in. The homeowner decided to leave the window. This was a small room, and they turned it into a bathroom. They left the window, put a cute little window coverings over it, used a piece of furniture and retrofitted it for the sink, and then brought in an old chest of drawers to use it for the towels and the linens instead of a closet. The other thing that I just loved what these people did in this house is they hand stenciled the floor in this checkerboard pattern. And then what we're looking at here is consider the element of surprise. Think about the unexpected. You have guests that come over. I mean, how clever was this homeowner? Small bathroom again, but for their sink, they used an old sewing cabinet, put a marble top on it, did the raised sink. Again, faucets that attach to the wall. You know, thinking outside the box. Faucets don't have to be attached to the countertop. And then just little baskets to store towels and the toilet paper. And here's a renovator's tip. Rummaging through salvage yards in pursuit of an old soapstone or enameled sink and antique faucets, they can be fun and pay off in savings. Just be sure to check out the fittings and the threads of these old treasures to ensure that they meet local plumbing codes and can accommodate modern pipes. Because typically you've got a couple of choices. You do either 5/8 pipe or you do 3/4 pipe or 1/2 inch pipe. So those are just some of the considerations that you might want to make when you're picking through the renovators catalog or scrounging around at one of these salvage yards. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to another house that we used in the book. And this house is a wonderful example of a gambrel roof. I was lucky enough to go to the house's 200-year anniversary party, and it was a lot of fun. So in this house, we see the main Colonial with the central fireplace, chimney, and then what has been added to the back is a lean-to. So just as I was explaining with the salt box home, here we can see the lean-to is this skinny little new addition that's been added, and the roof is only just a little sloping roof that then meets the upper level of the roof of the main house. And what the homeowners added this on for is part mudroom. So I'm going to start with the mudroom. Adorable. You walk in, the door, as we can see, is open. We come into this mudroom. The homeowners added a skylight, and the reason they did that, even though this lean-to has windows, but you can see that the window that we see straight ahead is on the old part of the house, and they wanted to retain that window. So the skylight in the lean-to is bringing more light into that kitchen that is still part of the old house. They got these beams from a salvage yard so that they could connect what was happening in the old part of the house with this new addition. Even the light fixtures are these beautiful Colonial fixtures with pewter and flame bulbs. And then what we see is they've used a brick floor that was typically used exterior, not so much interior in Colonial homes, but use the idea of the brick floor because this is the mudroom. This is the main way that they come and go through the house. In the wintertime, living in New England, I can attest to that our winters are brutal. And then these cupboards that are flanking the window seat is actually their coat closets. And then once again, here we do see another quaint window seat. I do want to point out while this slide is on the screen, and I haven't pointed it out in previous slides, but you can see these vents where heating and air conditioning systems have been put into these homes. And that's another thing that you'll find in my book. There's a whole chapter dedicated to how do we put in heating and air conditioning systems into these old houses. Okay, so this is the same house, and now what we are is we're looking from the old part of the house, and we are now looking through that window into the mudroom that was added on as a lean-to. So we can see this beam, this exposed beam in the original house, and how that was tied in to the design of the mudroom. The other thing that I just really loved what the homeowner did is this very large black and white checkerboard floor just really does help expand this sense of a small space. It gives you the feeling that it's bigger, and part of that is because the checkerboard is run on the diagonal. Anytime that you run a checkerboard on the diagonal, it does make the room feel bigger, okay? All right, so in history, the Old Ordinary was a one-time way station where weary travelers could get a meal, a drink, and conversation. A lot of times these taverns also gave overnight lodging. So this is an example of an original Old Ordinary or tavern that dates, this particular one dates from the 1680s. And I just wanted to bring it in at this point because what you can see is there is this kind of bar area, and that is where the owner, the barkeep, would stay. And you can see it is surrounded by these spindles so that this could be locked up almost like a jail cell at night. And usually it's cut off from the picture, but the top would also have a hinged spindle so that these would be dropped down, and then this would all be locked up so that the people that were spending the night couldn't sneak down in the middle of the night to get themselves a hot toddy, okay? But it was the inspiration for this homeowner in order to get that concept and transfer it into their wet bar. So this is just, I just loved what they did here. So it is closed off. You've got this Dutch door here on the left, and then behind the height of this surface, they do have like a wine cooler and ice maker, and you know, that's where they hide all of the modern conveniences. But everything that they did here, right down to the cup board, gives you the feeling of these old ordinaries. So I just have a few more examples of the creativity of some of these homeowners and the projects that appear in my book. This one is also a mudroom, and the mudroom again added as the connector. So we're going from the main part of the house, which was a cape, added the connector room, and the connector room connects us to the barn. So through the door in the distance is actually the barn, and this connector room is now the mudroom. So you really come into the home from the mudroom. You go to the right to the old part of the house, the cape, and to the left to the barn. But everything again that the homeowner has done has maintained this sense of the colonialism. From again finding a piece of furniture with drawers and cupboards to you know, put hats and mittens, and then the plate rack that's hanging on the wall, and then you can see towards, going towards the entry into the barn, a cabinet that would be used to store their winter coats. And then again, the colors all very traditional for the colonial period, the yellow ochre and the greens, and the fact that they even have a floor cloth that has been hand painted on canvas, stenciled and varnished on the floor. And then going into the barn, in this case, the family didn't have to raise the rafters. The barn was big enough to where what you see is what you get. And what they did again then is opened up the sides with these large paned glass windows, and then the end wall opening it up to this large French door and Palladian window above it, and then the built-in bookcases, or I should say again, built-out bookcases. And this is really their den or family room. This is where they go and watch TV. And then in the other part of the house, so this is the same house, they have a sitting room, and you actually go from the mudroom into the sitting room, and then from the sitting room you would then enter the kitchen. But from the sitting room, again, lovely original details of the cape. You can see the tongue and groove paneling, the exposed wooden beams. Looking opposite the settee is what they have is this large armoire which hides the computer. It's actually a desk, so it's an office. It's a little home office in an armoire. So once the homeowner is finished doing her work, she can simply slide in a tray with the laptop and shut the cupboard doors, and then it becomes a really nice, cozy sitting area. Okay, so to end the presentation, I know it's quick and I could be here all day talking to you about colonial capes and salt box houses, but just basically don't be afraid to add on a new addition if you have to. If you have no other way to get space, adding on a new addition is the perfect way to get it. Take cues from inside the original house, and then don't be afraid to update it to your lifestyle. Not anybody else's, but update your home to your lifestyle. Okay, and I just wanted to end by saying learn more, read more. I have another lecture on bungalow style that I will be giving. I believe that lecture is being given in Boston and in Washington, D.C. So that will give you something to look forward to. Thank you very much.